We all have core beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world that are so deeply ingrained we hardly even realize they're a core belief. It's just simply the way we think, feel, or see things. In fact, we don't notice them because they're actually the lens through which we experience others and the world. Now, there are many kinds of core beliefs. There's positive core beliefs like I'm good at my work, I'm a good person, I'm a great husband or wife. And there's also negative core beliefs. I'm weak, I'm a loser, I'm unlovable, I will end up alone. No one likes me, I'm worthless, the world is dangerous, people can't be trusted. Nothing ever goes right for me. And the thing about core beliefs is that they are shaped and formed in childhood. And it's not like our family or our caretakers, our parents set us down and said, this is our family values, you must learn this. It rather is shaped implicitly through what is acceptable, not acceptable, the patterns that play out, the family dynamics, especially during times of stress or traumatic periods in childhood, and especially during unrepaired ruptures that repeat themselves hundreds, if not thousands of times in our families. Now, people are not born with the core beliefs. They actually have to learn them. And information that contradicts core beliefs is actually often ignored. We filter it out because, again, having a core belief, it is the lens through which we view the world and we experience the world. So we often don't even question our own core beliefs. And the thing about core beliefs, too, is they tend to be rigid and long-standing. Again, unless we can really see and acknowledge that it's a core belief, we often don't recognize it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Core beliefs, and how do we create new core beliefs if the ones we have are maladapted? Let's get started.
Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship, a podcast that provides support and guidance to help heal the wounds of attachment trauma. Whether you find yourself struggling with unresolved issues in the past or have experienced trauma in your current relationship, our goal is to provide accurate, scientifically informed information, as well as the tools to help you create a secure connection between you and your partner. And here's your host, Tom Philp.
Okay, so with the understanding of core beliefs, as I laid out at the beginning of this episode, what I want to do now is I want to lean heavily on a metaphor. So give me a few minutes here to sort of set the stage, because I stumbled on this the other day and it seemed to resonate with some couples I was working with, and I really liked the metaphor. So I want to use the idea of a tree as a metaphor for sort of how our brain works. So when we ask ourselves, why do we behave in the same characteristic ways? Why do we become our habits? It's because we tend to have those same core beliefs as anchors that we go back to. And again, I like the idea of this lens we use to experience the world. When you use a lens, you often don't think about the lens you're using. You think about the experience, the action, the people that are framed within that lens, and not necessarily why the lens is a certain color or shape or has a certain assumption built into it. So if we think about a tree for a moment, now let's imagine, say, a mighty oak tree with its tall, majestic branches. It shoots out from the trunk. Now imagine the tree about, let's say, 30 feet high and 30 feet wide. So this is a good-sized tree. Coming up from the ground is a rather large trunk, which eventually shoots off into different branches. Now, these initial branches are large because they have to bear the weight of the other 80% of the tree. So towards the bottom of the trunk are the larger branches, which then eventually give way to smaller branches, and then eventually even to little twigs that hold the leaves. Now, if we can visualize that, which is not hard, we've all seen a tree before, I want you to think about this tree as a metaphor for how the brain works. So imagine every time you have a thought or a feeling, a group of neurons shoots up from the trunk and follows that same path as it moves along various branches. Now, every time you think, I'll always be alone, it takes the same predictable path from the trunk of the tree up through a larger branch to its eventual destination down towards a smaller branch and to where maybe a twig is holding a leaf. Now, what we call this predictable path a neuronal pathway, because that's essentially the way the neurons fire. And these neurons are very stubborn. They get used to firing and taking a certain path. In fact, they're so stubborn that they only want to go the same route every time they fire. Now, there's an old saying in the neuroscience field, what fires together wires together, meaning the more the same route is taken when your neurons fire, the more they reinforce your negative beliefs. And so out of the thousands of experiences you've had growing up in your family that were unrepaired ruptures, where there might have been neglect, and these core beliefs were created, let's say, for example, I'll always be alone, or I'll never get the love I need, then every time you have that thought, it takes a predictable course through your brain. Just like the branches of the tree, it begins to fire and it moves up in the same course as it always does. And in essence, you're reinforcing that thinking because you're reinforcing that experience because you're using the same lens to view your experiences or your partner through, and you're coming to the same predictable conclusion. And so we might even say it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. And part of therapy, part of good therapy, challenges that predictable course that your neurons want to take, your neuronal pathway, if you will, and it tries to create a different pathway. And so all of this is leading to the question, how can we create new branches, essentially? How do we get information, our neuronal pathways, to take a different route so that when the neurons fire and they come to a juncture and they take the left branch normally, how do we get them to take the right branch, How do we get them to take a different course and deviate from its normal path so that we actually can see and use a different lens to experience the world differently, to then be able to challenge these core beliefs that we have. And so with all of this in mind, the idea of core beliefs and the understanding that our brain kind of works like a tree where information flows through predictable paths up from the trunk to the larger limbs out to the smallest of the limbs, then the question becomes, how do we create new branches? How do we give ourselves an opportunity to at least give these neurons a fighting chance to take a different course? Well, first of all, this is not easy because remember when I said core beliefs are hard to recognize because they are the lens through which we frame our experience? Let me use a little bit different metaphor that kind of resonates with me. Hopefully it will with you too. When I'm watching a movie, I'm watching the characters and the action in the movie. I'm watching their behaviors. I'm watching the expressions on their face. I'm watching their words that they're saying, and I'm taking all of this in. What I don't often question is the angle from which it's shot, or maybe that the director has chosen to use a filter on the lens so that it gives that frame a certain hue that it would not normally have had. And so this is kind of what I say about core beliefs. They are the lens through which we view our experiences, and we're often so focused on the people and the feelings and the words of our experience that we don't often recognize the actual lens through which we use. Why do we look at it from that angle? Why is there this filter that we have over our lens that's casting a certain opaqueness or a shadowiness or whatever sort of mood the director wanted to set? He or she might have used a lens, a filter on that lens. And so these are kind of ways our core beliefs can work. And so when I say it's difficult to recognize core beliefs, it's because of that fact alone, that they are so deeply held, that they are rigid, and that they are long-standing, that it's difficult for us to even question our core beliefs. So, as you might imagine, how do we create new core beliefs? The first thing we have to do is we have to begin to try to identify what are some of my core beliefs. And so we have to ask ourselves, why do I do what I do? Why do I believe what I believe? And we have to sort of challenge that. Why did I view that a certain way? Is there any experience that I've had in the past that might have caused me to believe this? Or we might think, were there any assumptions I carried into this interaction? I went to talk to my partner about my feelings when they hurt my feelings the other day. And I just noticed now in reflecting on it that I was really nervous. I was very anxious. Why? Because I felt my partner was going to dismiss my feelings. Why did I think that they might dismiss my feelings? Well, because a pattern has built up in the past. Okay, that makes sense to me. But if there wasn't a pattern there, then is this coming from a different experience? Oh, well, my parents always dismissed my feelings. I never had a voice in my family growing up. Or if I said that I was hurting, it didn't matter. I was told I was to walk it off or whatever else, or get over it. Or I would be really told to, I'll really give you something to hurt about because my pain somehow wasn't significant enough. So we have to begin to question how we think. We have to begin to question why we think the way we do. This is not actually an easy task because I said before, we don't go around questioning why we think the way we do. We just think or we feel, and then we assume that it's a positive or an accurate representation of our reality, when in fact many core beliefs are not representative of reality. And that is very true with trauma as well. A lot of times trauma is not representative of the actual event that has happened. It is actually more of the meaning we make from it, and over time how we've added and subtracted that meaning based on our memory of it. And so rarely are our core beliefs an exact representation of what happened to us, but rather they've been filtered through this lens over and over and over that's created meaning that then has come to play a significant role in our relationships. So the first thing to do to begin to challenge our core beliefs or create new branches, new pathways, is for us to begin to question our core beliefs. This can be unsettling in and of itself, where we actually meta think, we think about our thinking, we begin to question and challenge why we think the way we do. So step number one is really just to be able to challenge yourself, and you do that just by asking questions. Why did I experience that situation the way I did? Why did I get so anxious about coming to my partner and just talking to my feelings about them? Is there precedence for that? Is it possible that my anxiety plays a role in that? Is it possible that the way I'm framing or the lens I'm using to view my partner in those interactions actually contributes more to my anxiety and contributes more to the rupture that can get created than it does to the eventual repair process. So just being able to challenge our core beliefs by asking questions about the assumptions and the lens through which we view and experience others and the world. The second thing we need to do is to challenge the evidence. I've kind of hinted at this in step one. So once you've identified a negative belief, oh, I know what I do. I always tend to go to this place where I just assume my partner doesn't care about me. If I see them doing something, if they jump up and they want to go to the grocery store at 10 o'clock at night and get some ice cream or something, and they've been gone all day, all of a sudden it hits me in a place where, my gosh, I don't feel like I have a partner here with me. They just kind of go and do whatever it is they want to do. I feel more like a roommate. This feels more like a hotel than it does a house for them. They just come and go, and isn't that nice? They must not care about me. So notice how all of this can play out in milliseconds through a feeling or an image or even just a sensation that can come up through the body up to our brainstem. It can fire our protective mechanisms, and it takes its predictable path to, I guess he doesn't care about me. If he did care, he wouldn't do this or he wouldn't say that. If she did care, she wouldn't behave in this way. So we have to begin to challenge the evidence. Is this really about my partner not caring about me, or could it be something else? So being able to challenge the evidence is looking for counter evidence. Well, yesterday when I was feeling sad, they came and sat with me for an hour and talked with me on the couch. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about that. Or on Mother's Day, they came and brought me breakfast in bed and celebrated me the entire day. Or, they initiated sex, which they know how important that is to me and how much I really appreciate that, because I feel like I'm the one that initiates it all the time. And so just last week, they initiated. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So notice how our core beliefs oftentimes can filter out the positive, anything that might contradict that. We have to be able to try to look for new evidence or different evidence that might counter our core beliefs. And finally, we have to develop a more positive alternative. So instead of just getting rid of a negative belief, we have to come up with a more empowering and realistic one to replace it. So for example, instead of I'm unlovable, we might settle on I'm worthy of love and connection, which provides experiences that reinforce that. So we challenge ourselves to hang out with friends more, or to get back into the dating scene, or to notice ways that our spouse shows up for us when we might not notice them otherwise. Eventually, what will happen is we will create another branch or another pathway for our neurons to travel in our brain and through the tree, as the metaphor that we're using. And by doing so, we actually create more adaptive beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world. So how do we give these neurons a choice? We have to be able to challenge our beliefs. We have to be able to look for the evidence that would support the opposite sometimes, especially if it's a negative belief. We need to look for evidence, or at least challenge, look for contradictory information. And then finally, we have to try to develop more positive beliefs and then create experiences for ourselves that reinforce that. And when we do these types of things, what happens is we end up creating new branches on the tree, new pathways for our neurons to travel, which at least if they don't always go that way, at least they have more of an opportunity to sometimes reinforce the more positive aspects about us and our relationships than the negative ones. So we're always not just stuck in the same negative core beliefs, but we give them alternatives, if you will. Well, I hope this was helpful today. I really appreciate everybody listening. And as always, I love the feedback. Thank you so much. My goal for you is to take this information and bit by bit be able to apply it to your life and your relationships. Remember, you can only make one change, one realistic change at a time. So just pick one thing, and for the next few days or even for the next week, just try to begin to work on that one thing alone. And until then, we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Trauma Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.